I thought I had the perfect life, a loving wife, two wonderful children, and a stable marriage that lasted almost 20 years. But one innocent change in our daily routine revealed a truth that shattered everything I believed in forever. It turned out that not only was my married life a lie, but so was my parenthood. This is a story of betrayal, exposure, and the difficult decision I had to make when I found out that my children were not really mine. For the longest time, I believed I had the kind of life most people would envy. I had a stable career as an engineer, a comfortable home in a peaceful Dallas suburb, and most importantly, a loving wife and two wonderful kids. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 18 years. Our children, Liam and Sarah, were growing into intelligent, kind-hearted young adults. Our life was predictable, but content. We had family game nights, Sunday barbecues, and lazy Saturday mornings watching cartoons with the kids. I wasn't naive. I knew marriage wasn't always sunshine and roses. There were occasional arguments, disagreements about finances, and the struggles that come with balancing work and home life. But at the end of the day, I trusted Emily. I thought we were a team, building a life together, supporting each other through thick and thin. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Hindsight, as they say, is 20/20ths. But at the time, I had no reason to suspect that my world was about to shatter. It started subtly. Emily had always been interested in fitness, but over the past year, she had taken it to another level. She joined an exclusive gym, started doing intense training programs, and became hyper-focused on eating healthy. I wasn't against any of it. If anything, I admired her discipline. But then she started directing that same focus toward me. "Mark, you really should start working out," she would say at dinner. "It's not just about looks, it's about your health." I laughed it off at first. I wasn't in terrible shape, but I had put on some weight over the years. The long hours at work, combined with family responsibilities, didn't leave much time for gym sessions. Still, Emily's insistence continued. She started signing me up for personal training sessions, preparing lighter meals, and dropping articles about longevity and fitness into our conversations. At first, I thought it was sweet. She cared about me and wanted me to be healthy. But there was something else in her eyes when she spoke. Something I couldn't quite place at the time. Within 6 months, I had lost almost 30 pounds. Emily was thrilled. "You look amazing," she would say, running her hands over my chest, admiring my transformation. But the way she looked at me wasn't just admiration. It was something else. Evaluation. As if she was assessing a project she had been working on. Then one night, she casually suggested something that sent my world into a spiral. We were sitting at the dinner table, the kids already upstairs for the night. Emily was swirling the last bit of wine in her glass when she glanced up at me with an unreadable expression. "I've been thinking," she began. "What do you think about adding some excitement to our marriage?" I raised an eyebrow. "Excitement?" She smiled, leaning forward. "Something new. Something adventurous. Like bringing in someone else." I nearly choked on my drink. "Wait, what?" She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "Not in a bad way, Mark. Just exploring. It's actually really common these days. A lot of couples do it to keep things fresh." I pulled my hand away, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. "Are you suggesting a threesome?" She nodded, her eyes locked onto mine. "With Amanda." Amanda was her friend, someone we had known for years. The idea of even considering something like that was beyond anything I had ever imagined. I shook my head immediately. "No, absolutely not." Emily sighed, as if she expected my reaction. "Mark, you've changed so much. You're more confident, more attractive than ever. This could be fun for both of us." "No," I said firmly. "I don't care how common you say it is. I have no interest in bringing someone else into our marriage." She frowned but didn't push further that night. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Emily brought it up again and again. Each time, she framed it as an opportunity to spice things up, to strengthen our connection. Each time, I refused. But something changed in her attitude. Every time I rejected the idea, she looked disappointed, almost as if she was testing me, waiting for a different answer. One night, after yet another discussion on the topic, she finally snapped. "You're being so close-minded, Mark. Do you even care about keeping our marriage exciting? I was taken aback. Of course I do. But this isn't the way to do it. She exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. I just don't want us to become stagnant, to fall into the same routine forever. That argument ended in silence. But the distance between us started to grow. She became colder, more distant. And yet, a week later, she brought it up once more. But this time with a different proposal. What if we do it on our terms? She said. Not at home. Strict rules. We try it once and see how it goes. Something in her voice was pleading. I hesitated. I love my wife. I didn't want to lose her. Against every instinct screaming at me to say no, I relented. Fine, I said, my voice strained, but only under strict conditions. Her face lit up. I promise, Mark. It'll be safe. It'll be exciting. But that promise was the first of many lies. The night was set. Emily told me everything was arranged, that Amanda had booked a private place, so we wouldn't have to worry about anyone seeing us. But when the time came, I noticed something was off. Instead of going to another location, Amanda showed up at our house. My stomach tightened. What is she doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Emily lowered her voice. It's just easier this way. No hotels, no questions. The kids are asleep. It's fine. I felt the weight of my own mistake pressing down on me. I had agreed to this under certain conditions, and now she was already breaking them. Then I saw something else. Asterisk, asterisk, they had no protection. Asterisk, asterisk. My heart pounded in my chest. Where are the condoms? Emily shrugged. Amanda and I trust each other. It's fine. That was it. I snapped. This isn't happening, I said, stepping back. I don't care what we agreed on. This isn't right. Emily's face twisted with frustration. Mark, don't do this. I shook my head. No, you did this. You pushed this. And now you're breaking every promise you made about it. I walked out of the room, leaving them there. That night, Emily and I slept in separate rooms for the first time in our marriage. And for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The next morning, she barely spoke to me. But I knew something had shifted between us. And I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of something much, much worse. The night after Emily's betrayal, I barely slept. My mind raced with questions, doubts, and the sinking feeling that my marriage was slipping through my fingers. The woman I had spent nearly 2 decades with, the mother of my children, was becoming a stranger. Worse yet, I was starting to wonder if she had been a stranger all along. The following morning, I expected some sort of confrontation, maybe even an apology. Instead, Emily acted as if nothing had happened. She hummed as she made coffee, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her from across the kitchen, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. Finally, I broke the silence. We need to talk. She barely looked up. About what? I clenched my jaw. About last night? About the fact that you broke every condition we agreed on. About the fact that you thought I'd be okay with you bringing Amanda into our home and ignoring basic precautions. Emily sighed, setting her phone down. Mark, you're overreacting. It was just one night. It didn't even happen, thanks to you storming off. I let out a bitter laugh. You really don't see the problem, do you? She rolled her eyes. It's not like I cheated on you. The words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, feeling a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. You think that makes it better? That you didn't technically sleep with someone else? Emily shrugged. It was an experiment. I thought you'd be more open-minded. I was wrong. Can we move on now? Move on. Like it was nothing. Like she hadn't shattered something inside me. That was when I realized I was dealing with someone who had no remorse, no guilt. And if she had so easily dismissed this, what else had she dismissed over the years? Over the next few days, Emily and I barely spoke. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, resentment growing like an infection. But what gnawed at me the most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the way she acted like nothing had changed. And then came the late nights. Emily had always been a night owl, but suddenly, she had new work commitments that kept her out past midnight. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, was now always in her pocket or face down on the table. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off. Business is picking up. I have more clients now. That was true. Her online business had been doing well, but something didn't sit right with me. Then one night I noticed something strange. I had woken up around 2 a.m. to get a glass of water. As I walked past our bedroom window, I saw a car parked across the street. It wasn't one I recognized. More importantly, when Emily had come home that night, she had taken an Uber. So whose car was that? The next morning I casually mentioned it. Did you see that car outside last night? Emily barely reacted. No, probably just a neighbor's guest. Something about her tone was too casual, too dismissive. I let it go for the moment, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. At this point, I knew I couldn't trust Emily's words. I needed facts, cold, undeniable facts. I started small. One evening, while she was in the shower, I checked her phone. It was locked with a new passcode. That had never happened before. My stomach twisted into knots. Next, I checked our shared laptop. Emily did most of her work on her personal computer, but occasionally, she used ours for quick searches. I went through the browser history, and that's when I found it. Multiple searches about discreet dating and how to hide texts from your spouse. My blood ran cold. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. This wasn't just an impulsive mistake. She had been planning something, maybe for weeks, maybe longer. I needed more proof. I decided to track her movements. I wasn't proud of it, but at this point I needed to know the truth. One evening, when Emily left for one of her client meetings, I followed her. I kept my distance, careful not to be seen. She drove downtown, pulled into a parking garage, and entered a high-end hotel. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. There was no mistaking what this was. She was cheating. But with who? I waited, heart pounding, watching the entrance like a hawk. About 20 minutes later, another car pulled up. A man stepped out. It was Jason. Jason was an old colleague of hers. They had worked together years ago, and I had always suspected he had a thing for her. But Emily had brushed it off. He's just a friend, she'd said. My hands trembled as I took out my phone and started recording. I watched as they entered the hotel together, laughing, completely at ease. The betrayal was real. And now, I had proof. That night, I waited for her to come home. When she walked in, she looked surprised to see me sitting on the couch, waiting. "How was your meeting?" I asked, voice steady. She hesitated. "Phoenix. Long day." I nodded. "Where did you go?" She blinked. "Downtown." I pulled out my phone and played the video. Her face drained of color. "Mark, I can explain." "No," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You don't get to explain. You lied. Over and over again." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I stood up, staring at the woman I had once trusted more than anyone. Was it just Jason? Or were there others? Tears welled in her eyes. "Mark, please." "Was it just Jason?" I repeated, my voice rising. She swallowed hard, and then, barely above a whisper, she said the words that broke me. "No." I turned away, feeling like I might be sick. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a pattern, a life of deception, a marriage built on lies. And then the final blow. "I need to know something," I said, my voice hollow. "Liam and Sarah, are they mine?" Emily gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Her silence was deafening. The world around me blurred. My knees nearly gave out. The love I had for my children would never change. But if they weren't mine biologically, it meant Emily's betrayal had begun far earlier than I had ever imagined. I had thought the worst was behind me, but the real nightmare was just beginning. Part 3. The Depth of Deception. I sat in the silence of our living room, my whole world unraveling before me. Emily's confession hung in the air, suffocating, like a slow-acting poison I could feel sinking into my bones. She had betrayed me, lied to me, and now I wasn't even sure if my children were really mine. The weight of that thought was unbearable. She sat across from me, tears streaming down her face, hands trembling as she covered her mouth. But I couldn't find an ounce of sympathy left in me. I had spent years, decades, building a life with this woman, and now I realized I had been nothing more than a pawn in whatever game she had been playing. "I need answers." My voice came out low, almost guttural. I was holding on to the last shred of composure I had left. Are Liam and Sarah mine? Emily let out a shaky breath, refusing to meet my gaze. That silence was more damning than any words she could have spoken. I don't know, she finally admitted, her voice breaking. My stomach twisted into knots. My hands clenched into fists. That wasn't an answer. It was a death sentence to whatever trust had remained between us. I don't know, I repeated, each syllable laced with rage and disbelief. You had 2 children with me, and you don't know if I'm their father? She shook her head, sobbing harder now. Mark, it wasn't supposed to be like this. Then what was it supposed to be? My voice cracked as I stood up, pacing the room, trying to keep my fury in check. Was it supposed to be years of lies? Was it supposed to be me finding out like this? She buried her face in her hands. I never meant for you to find out. I let out a hollow laugh. Oh, well, that makes it all better. You were fine as long as I was kept in the dark. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The answer was clear as day. I needed to know, not just for myself, but for Liam and Sarah. They deserved the truth just as much as I did. The very next morning, I made an appointment at a clinic for a paternity test. I took the kids out for ice cream after school, making it seem like an ordinary day, when in reality, I was gathering the samples I needed. I told myself I was preparing for the worst, but nothing could have braced me for what was coming. The wait was excruciating. Every glance at my phone, every unopened email notification sent a wave of nausea through me. Emily had tried to talk to me several times since that night, but I refused to entertain her excuses. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want explanations. I wanted the truth. And then one afternoon, the email came through. I stared at the screen, hands shaking as I opened it. The results were right there, in black and white, and with one simple sentence, my world crumbled beneath me. For both of them, I dropped my phone onto the kitchen counter, my legs giving out beneath me. It was real. It wasn't a mistake. Liam and Sarah, my children, the ones I had held in my arms since birth, whose first words and first steps I had witnessed, weren't mine. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing. I don't remember how many minutes or hours passed before Emily walked in and saw me. She didn't need to ask. She saw the phone, the test results still open on the screen. Her face crumpled in despair. Mark! I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair over in the process. Don't say a word. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. There was nothing left to say. After I had time to compose myself, barely, I knew there was only one thing left to do. I had to find their real father. I knew it was Jason. It had to be. But I needed confirmation, and I needed it from him. I found him easily enough. His social media profile was filled with updates about his so-called successful life. Fancy dinners, expensive cars, exotic vacations. And to think some of that money probably should have gone toward raising the kids he had abandoned. I sent him a simple message. We need to talk. Now. At first, he left me on read. But after I sent him a picture of the paternity results, his response came quickly. Where? We met at a coffee shop later that evening. I had never felt such pure hatred toward another human being. The moment he walked in, casually dressed like he didn't have a care in the world, I wanted to punch him in the face. He sat across from me, eyes wary. Mark, I cut him off. Don't waste my time. Did you know? His face paled. He didn't answer. I slammed my fist against the table, making the coffee cups rattle. Did you? No. Jason swallowed hard, rubbing the back of his neck. Emily told me years ago, but she said you didn't know, that you thought they were yours. I exhaled sharply, struggling to stay composed. And you were just okay with that? With another man raising your kids? Jason had the audacity to look uncomfortable. I wanted to be involved, but Emily, she said it was better this way. That you were a good father, and that she didn't want to ruin everything. I let out a humorless laugh. She didn't want to ruin everything? She already did. He lowered his gaze. I never meant for this to happen, Mark. I swear. I shook my head, disgusted. You don't get to play the victim here. You knew. You let me live a lie. Silence hung between us. Finally, I stood up. Stay away from them. They're mine, whether or not we share DNA. Jason nodded, knowing he had no right to argue. I walked out, leaving him sitting there, alone with the mess he had helped create. I returned home that night, and for the first time in days, I went straight to my kids. They were watching TV, oblivious to the storm raging within me. I sat down between them, pulling them both into a tight embrace. They laughed, thinking I was just being silly. They had no idea that my heart was breaking, that I had spent the entire day questioning everything about my role in their lives. But then I realized something. I had been there for their first words, their first days of school, their scraped knees and bedtime stories. I had been the one to comfort them, to teach them, to love them unconditionally. Biology didn't make me their father. Love did. Emily had shattered my world, but she wouldn't take my children from me. No piece of paper, no DNA test, no past mistake could erase the bond one had with them. I kissed the top of their heads. I love you both, no matter what. Asterisk, asterisk. And I meant it. The battle with Emily wasn't over. There were legal matters to handle, decisions to be made. But in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't walking away from them. I was their father. And no one, not Emily, not Jason, not even fate, could take that from me. The weight of betrayal hadn't lifted, but in the days following my confrontation with Jason, I found a strange kind of clarity. My marriage was over, that much was clear. But my role as a father? That was something I would fight for with everything I had left. Emily and I had barely spoken since I received the DNA results. She had tried a few times, weak attempts to explain, to beg, to tell me she still loved me. But I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. Love? Love didn't look like nearly 2 decades of deception. Love didn't lie every day for 16 years. I hadn't told the kids yet. How do you even begin a conversation like that? How do you tell the children you've raised and adored that you're not really their father? For now, I focused on one thing, protecting them from the fallout. I knew I needed legal help. If Emily thought for 1 second that I was going to let her dictate how this played out, she was wrong. I made an appointment with a well-known divorce attorney in Dallas, Olivia Carter. She came highly recommended, known for being ruthless in cases involving infidelity. The morning of our first meeting, I walked into her office with a folder of evidence, DNA results, financial records, even the video I had taken of Emily and Jason entering the hotel. Olivia flipped through it with an unreadable expression before looking up at me. "This is a mess," she said bluntly, "but it works in your favor." I leaned forward. "I don't care about the money, the house. She can have all of it. The only thing I care about is Liam and Sarah." She nodded. "That's where it gets complicated." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Olivia sighed. "Legally, you're not their biological father. That means Emily can challenge your rights to custody. The air left my lungs. But I've raised them their whole lives." "I know," she said, "and the courts will take that into account. But we need to be smart about this. Does Emily know you're taking legal action?" "No." "Good. Don't tell her." "Not yet." I nodded. I wasn't about to give Emily any advantage. That night, Emily tried once again to talk to me. "Mark, please," she said, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, eyes red from crying. "I know I hurt you, but don't shut me out like this." I stared at her, barely recognizing the woman I had spent almost half my life with. "You didn't just hurt me, Emily. You destroyed everything." She wiped at her tears. "I never wanted this." A bitter laugh escaped me. "That's the thing, isn't it? You never wanted to get caught. But you were fine living this lie as long as it was convenient for you." She flinched. "Mark, I love you." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You don't. You love the life I built for you. You love the security. But you sure as hell didn't love me enough to be honest." She stepped forward, but I held up a hand. "I've already contacted a lawyer." Emily's breath hitched. "A lawyer? I'm filing for divorce." Her face crumpled. "Mark, please, we can fix this." "There's nothing left to fix," I said coldly. "And one more thing. I'm fighting for full custody of the kids." Her eyes widened in horror. "You can't do that." "I can," I said. "And I will." Emily didn't waste time. She hired her own attorney within days, and just like Olivia had predicted, she was fighting back. She wanted joint custody, claiming that despite her mistakes, she was still their mother and deserved to be in their lives. That was the one thing we could agree on. I wasn't trying to take the kids away from her. But I wasn't going to let her dictate how this played out, either. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and I built our case. We gathered testimonies from friends, teachers, even Liam and Sarah's pediatrician, all stating that I had been the primary caregiver. Olivia also had me document everything. Every expense, every moment Emily had been absent over the years, every time she had chosen her affair over our family. Then, we found something I hadn't expected. Financial records showing that Emily had been secretly transferring money to Jason. Olivia smirked when she saw the evidence. She's been financially supporting him. That's going to work against her in court. Emily wasn't just unfaithful. She had been using our shared resources to maintain her affair. That was the final nail in the coffin. The day of our first court hearing, I sat in the courtroom, heart pounding. Emily was across from me, looking nervous but determined. Jason wasn't there, probably smart enough to stay out of it. Emily's attorney tried to paint me as controlling, as someone who was trying to punish his wife rather than act in the best interest of the children. Olivia, however, was prepared. "We're not here to punish Mrs. Carter," she said coolly. "We're here to protect the stability and emotional well-being of Liam and Sarah. Mr. Carter has been their primary caregiver since birth. He has provided for them emotionally, financially, and physically. And despite discovering that they are not biologically his, he remains committed to being their father." Emily's attorney tried to argue that she had been an involved mother, that her actions didn't negate her role in their lives. But then Olivia presented the financial records. "Mrs. Carter has been secretly transferring money to her affair partner for years," she stated. "Money that should have gone toward supporting her family. She has demonstrated a pattern of deception and financial irresponsibility." Emily's face went pale. She hadn't expected us to find that. The judge didn't make any final decisions that day, but I could tell the tides were shifting in my favor. Weeks later, the final ruling came in. I was granted primary custody of Liam and Sarah. Emily would have visitation rights, but the judge ruled that due to her history of dishonesty and financial misconduct, full custody was not in the children's best interest. Emily sobbed when the verdict was read. I didn't. I had already mourned our marriage. This wasn't a victory. It was survival. As we left the courtroom, Emily reached for my hand. "Mark, please. Don't shut me out completely." I pulled away. "You shut yourself out, Emily." She had made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. Life after the divorce was different, but in many ways it was better. The house was quieter, calmer. Liam and Sarah adapted, though it wasn't easy. I had conversations with them when they were old enough to understand, explaining things in a way that didn't villainize their mother, but didn't sugarcoat the truth either. Jason never tried to claim them. He had already lost his chance at being a father. I was their father. Years later, when Liam graduated high school, he hugged me and said, "Thanks for never giving up on us, Dad." That was all the confirmation I ever needed. Emily had lost everything. I had lost a marriage built on lies. But I had kept what mattered most. And that was worth everything. The gavel's final echo in the courtroom marked the end of one battle and the beginning of another. The legal war was over, but the emotional battlefield stretched out before me like an endless road. Winning custody of Liam and Sarah had been my greatest victory, but it came with its own weight. Now, I had to rebuild a life that had been shattered by deception, betrayal, and heartbreak. Emily had lost her bid for primary custody, but she still had visitation rights. I could see the devastation in her eyes when the ruling was read, but any sympathy I might have felt had long since withered away. She had made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. Adjusting to our new reality wasn't easy. The house, once filled with tension and unspoken resentment, felt different. Not empty, not broken, just peaceful. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was liberating. Liam and Sarah handled the transition better than I expected. There were tears at first, of course. The wounds of a broken home don't heal overnight. But with time, routines were established, stability returned, and laughter began to creep back into our lives. I didn't sugarcoat things for them. I answered their questions with honesty, but without cruelty. Emily was their mother, and despite what she had done to me, she was still a part of their lives. I wouldn't poison them against her. That was her mistake, not mine. There were hard moments. Liam, ever the quiet observer, had taken to watching me closely, as if searching for cracks in my armor. One night, as we sat on the back porch, he finally voiced the question I knew had been brewing inside him. "Dad, do you regret it? Loving Mom?" I exhaled slowly, staring at the darkened horizon. "I don't regret loving her," I admitted. "I regret who she chose to become." He nodded, absorbing my words in silence. That night, he hugged me tighter than he ever had before. Emily tried to hold on to the illusion of control for a while. At first, she acted like she could sway the kids to her side, playing the victim whenever they visited. But children are smarter than we give them credit for. They saw through her act. The first few visits were filled with questions from Sarah. "Mom, why did you lie to Dad?" Emily never had a good answer. Instead, she tried to redirect, to manipulate, but Sarah was relentless. Liam, on the other hand, simply withdrew. He didn't fight, didn't argue. He just stopped caring. And that, more than anything, broke Emily's heart. She had been caught in a web of her own making, and now her children were slipping away from her. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Jason had abandoned her completely. Once the truth had come out, he wanted nothing to do with her. He hadn't just lost his chance at fatherhood. He had lost his respectability, his career, and his reputation. Last I heard, he had moved out of state, running from the wreckage he helped create. Emily was alone. She tried reaching out to me, first through emails, then calls. She wanted to talk, to explain, to see if there was any way to salvage even a sliver of what we had once been. I ignored her. Then she showed up at the house. It was a cold evening when I opened the door to find her standing there, shivering, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Mark," she said softly, "can we talk?" I didn't invite her in. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. She swallowed hard. "I miss them. They're still here, Emily," I said. "But they're not blind. They see the truth now." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean to lose them." "You didn't mean to lose me either," I said. "But here we are." She exhaled shakily. "Do you hate me?" I considered the question. Once I had. The anger had burned so hot I thought it might consume me. But now, there was nothing left to burn. "No," I admitted. "I don't hate you, Emily. I just don't care anymore." That broke her. She let out a choked sob, covering her mouth as the weight of her actions finally settled onto her shoulders. She had spent years living a lie. Now, she had to live with the truth. Months passed. Seasons changed. And slowly, I healed. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. I reconnected with old friends. I started hobbies I had abandoned long ago. I focused on being the best father I could be. And then, something unexpected happened. I met someone. Her name was Rachel. She worked in finance, had been through her own heartbreak, and understood pain the way only someone who had lived through it could. We started slow. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but she made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. She saw me, not as the broken man Emily had left behind, but as someone worth knowing, worth loving. One evening, as we sat together on my porch, watching the sunset, she turned to me and smiled. "You seem lighter," she said. I nodded. "I think I finally am." The past still lingered in the background, but it no longer defined me. Emily had been a chapter of my life, a painful, necessary lesson. But she was not the whole story. I had turned the page, and for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright.